Hello all, thank you for being here. Today's meeting will involve an overview of OSA's implementation of House Bill 21-1303 or the Buy Clean Colorado Act. We'll go through some important information for you all to know, and then at the end we will discuss obtaining feedback from you and how we're going to move forward. We'll start with some introductions. So on the call, we have Sherry Giroux, the state architect, as well as Rod Vanderwall, who is manager of energy programs for the state. Then there's me. My name is Bailey Vigil, and my title is Buildings Greenhouse Gas Emissions Analyst for the Office of the State Architect in the Department of Personnel and Administration. I've been in this position for 1 month shy of a year now, and I look forward to getting things moving forward with this legislation. So you'll be hearing a lot more from me this next year. Cool. In terms of our agenda today, I'll go through an overview of House Bill 21-1303 and then touch on some of the important definitions that pertain to this topic. Then we will discuss the responsibilities and processes that are necessary for compliance, and we'll discuss how OSA would like to proceed with the feedback requests. Finally, we'll end with an opportunity for you to ask your questions. However, if you have questions during the meeting, please drop them in the chat, and if we aren't able to get to them right away, then they will be addressed at the end of the meeting. And please note that OSA will be holding additional trainings based on the outcomes of this meeting, and those trainings will likely be held in February or March of this next year. Cool. We'll start with the overview of House Bill 21-1303. So to begin this, we have CRS 2492-117 and 2492-118, which are the Colorado revised statutes encompassed in House Bill 21-1303. OSA was given authority to administer 2492-117, while CDOT was given authority to administer 2492-118. Therefore, the type of project that you have dictates which policy to follow. In simple terms, OSA is focused on vertical construction, while CDOT is focused on horizontal construction. Makes sense, maybe? Well, if you are constructing a building with a parking lot, you're going 2492-117 still applies to that project, and you'll have to follow OSA's policy. Therefore, in our meeting today, I will focus on OSA's role in the Buy Clean Colorado Act and the requirements imposed by 2492-117. For some more details, OSA has been directed to establish by policy a maximum acceptable global warming potential, or GWP, for each category of eligible materials used in an eligible project by January 1st of 2024. And the big difference between OSA and CDOT's policies is that OSA is establishing the GWP limits for the eligible materials, while CDOT is developing the process to record the emissions reductions that result. One other big difference is that OSA will begin requiring submission of environmental product declarations, or EPDs, for projects that are in solicitation on or after January 1st of 2024. But CDOT began requiring EPD submissions for their projects issued on July 1st of this year. So CDOT is already requiring EPD submissions. Oh, 1 second. Yes, these slides will be shared at the end, so everyone knows. As a final note on this slide, I'll mention that the bill is available on the OSA website under the Energy and Environment tab. I'll provide some more direction on that momentarily. Otherwise, a simple Google search also does the trick. Okay, this is where that direction comes from. So additionally, we've also created and posted OSA's policy to the OSA website on July 1st of this year. And so the information presented here today is representative of the contents of OSA's policy. However, we suggest that you also read through the actual policy that's posted on the OSA website. So to find it, first you'll go to the OSA website. There's a link here at the bottom you can follow. Otherwise, just search Colorado OSA. So then you'll go click along the top. There's an Energy and Environment tab. And from there, you'll be taken to a new page where there'll be a left navigation list where you can find the Buy Clean Colorado Act webpage. So click here, and then you'll be able to find the policy and additional information that we have. And it should be noted that that OSA will update this information with the most current relevant information pertaining to this legislation. So please refer to it when you need. Continuing on with the overview, some of the benefits of complying include meeting sustainability goals and achieving national rankings that require EPD submissions, such as LEED, Green Globes, and others. You'll build with lower embodied carbon emissions, i.e. start to develop green buildings. Another benefit is that contractors working on state projects already receive state tax exemptions, assuming that you share our tax exempt number with them. However, there will likely be additional tax exemptions available in the future when purchasing eligible materials due to Senate Bill 2251. Okay, some communications. Due to the statutory authority of House Bill 21-1303 and the emergence and development of this requirement, OSA will be involved with the OSA designated delegate via communications on all matters through the design and construction of projects. It is the delegate's responsibility to work with OSA to ensure compliance with the program through all phases of a construction project. This is to ensure that all waivers and modifications are handled within the same parameters. So when we boil it all down, this statement is to ensure that OSA is imposing the same criteria across all projects, to ensure all modifications and waivers undergo the same rigor of analysis. Each agency delegate will need to report to the OSA to demonstrate compliance. And during these initial stages of development of the program, it is pertinent that OSA is involved with all waiver processes, as well as understanding any issues that arise. Sweet, let's talk some important definitions. To start, eligible materials means materials used in the construction of a public project, including asphalt and asphalt mixtures, cement and concrete mixtures, glass, post-tension steel, reinforcing steel, structural steel, and wood structural elements. So these are the 9 basically categories of eligible materials which are affected by this policy. So eligible project, another big one. This means a public project as defined in CRS 2492-102, for which an agency of government issues a solicitation on or after January 1st of 2024, except that eligible project does not include any maintenance program for the upkeep of a public project or any road, highway, or bridge project. Embodied carbon is reported as global warming potential, GWP, and includes greenhouse gas emissions arising from the production, construction, use, and end of life of products or systems used in the construction of buildings, roads, and other infrastructure. Global warming potential, or GWP, a big one. This is a metric describing the potential climate change impact of a product or process as measured by a life cycle analysis and reported in an environmental product declaration. Product category rule means a set of specific rules, requirements, and guidelines necessary for developing Type 3 environmental declarations for one or more product categories. We get into the more fun definitions here momentarily. Stages A1 through A3 refers to the life cycle stages which define an EPD from cradle to gate and considers emissions from the raw materials extraction and processing, that's our stage A1, transport to the manufacturer, A2, and manufacturing of building materials, A3. That's more of that fabrication step for A3. Okay. Industry-wide environmental product declaration, or industry-wide EPD. This is an EPD that meets the representativeness criteria and is released by multiple manufacturers to publish the production weighted average footprint of the entire industry. So it's kind of a summary of the impact of a product across multiple manufacturers. Is the big definition. So let's talk environmental product declarations, or EPDs. So I briefly described an industry-wide EPD, but that's a little bit different than the type of EPD that you'll be required to submit. What I have on the slide is the definition that is in OSA's Buy Clean Colorado Act policy. So EPD compliance for the Buy Clean Colorado Act revolves around this definition. Feel free to read it here or just check it out later, since it is also posted on the OSA website. But I will give a brief explanation of what an EPD is. To start, there are actually 3 types of EPDs out there. However, we are only focused on type 3 EPDs, which are third-party verified labels that disclose the environmental impacts from manufacturing a product. So they've been verified by an external source. EPDs are great because they enable comparisons between products serving the same function. EPD labels are governed by international standards, and there are also standards that are required for life cycle assessments, which also contribute to the development of an EPD. All EPDs must follow the same accounting standards published in the product category rule for each product as defined previously. So manufacturers must first develop a PCR, and then they may run a life cycle analysis and develop an EPD from those results. At the OSA, we are working to develop an EPD compliance review form, which you'll be able to enter information from an EPD and get a result whether or not that EPD complies with the legislation. This form will be launched in the fall of 2023 and will also be included on the OSA website. So I'll mention again that industry-wide EPDs come from multiple manufacturers to give a regional representation of their emissions. OSA will only be accepting product-specific EPDs, which represent the resulting emissions from manufacturing specific materials and apply to a single manufacturer rather than a multitude. So, the definition of environmental product declaration, or EPD, or type 3 EPD, means third-party verified document that summarizes the life cycle assessment of a single product and publicly discloses its environmental impacts. EPDs enable comparisons between products serving the same function. So for an EPD to be deemed approved, A, the EPD must be a current product-specific type 3 EPD. This is important as they do have expiration dates. B, the EPD must reference all ISO standards, and you can see them here. And then C, the EPD must align with the applicable product category rule requirements. So these are to ensure that the EPD matches with compliance. And to show compliance from your side, consultants and contractors, delegates too, will need to verify that the GWP in the EPDs of the products they have specified, purchased, and installed is less than or equal to the limits established by OSA. Got through those definitions, let's talk responsibilities. I'll be honest with you, most of the reporting burden is imposed on agencies and institution delegates. So for the first year or so, OSA will work closely with the delegates to support compliance and understand the issues that arise. And as far as their internal responsibilities, agencies and institutions shall, 1, update their design standards with materials with EPDs, and 2, build project budgets that include the costs of all eligible materials. And that would include any additional costs imposed by buying compliant materials. And for the EPD process, for any solicitation beginning on or after January 1st of 2024, agencies and institutions of higher education shall require consultants, whether they be internal or external, to specify EPDs for all eligible materials considered in the design. Additionally, they shall require contractors to submit EPDs for all procured eligible materials prior to installation at the site. And then for the reporting piece, delegates must submit EPDs to the OSA as part of the L1 code compliance documentation. And as a note, OSA will only be accepting waivers that are submitted by the delegate. Okay, so let's dive into the delegate information a little bit more. So some of the delegate responsibilities include putting projects together. You may have to specify materials for your project, which will require research and analysis. Additionally, you shall build all eligible materials with EPDs into the cost estimate. It is important that you account for any cost increases that may occur. Delegates will also need to work with consultants and contractors. For example, if your agency or institution is requesting certain eligible materials be used in the construction of a project, then you'll need to work with the consultant on the project specifications to ensure that your needs are being met. In addition, it is the agency or institution's responsibility to determine if a waiver is needed and to initiate that process. The waiver process will be released at the start of the next fiscal year, so July. Finally, delegates must ensure that consultants and contractors that you hire can meet your needs. So this means evaluating each request for qualifications or RFQ and selecting firms that meet the requirements. Additionally, you must evaluate each bid and select contractors that can also meet the requirements for compliance. Okay, so let's talk about consultants now. And before I dive into these responsibilities, it's first important that I define what is meant by the term consultants. Consultants are defined in statute as any professional service provided by architects, industrial hygienists, engineers, landscape architects, and land surveyors. However, architects and engineers are the main professional services that will be of assistance with complying with this legislation. There is an additional caveat. So while an engineering or architectural firm could possess the embodied carbon skills, there is no need to hire an outside entity if the internal agency or institution design team understands how to evaluate EPDs. So in other terms, if your internal design team has the skills and specializations to evaluate EPDs and specify accordingly, then there is no need to hire an outside firm to assist with compliance. Hope that's clear. Now on to consultant responsibilities. For any solicitation beginning on or after January 1st of 2024, consultants shall prioritize products with EPDs for the design. Consultants shall specify an EPD for each eligible material considered in the design, and this will be within the project specifications included in the bid docs. Consultants shall verify that the GWP values included in each EPD that they specify is less than or equal to the maximum acceptable GWP limits as established by OSA. And as mentioned, there will be an EPD review form in the future, which will help with that. We're making our way through this. Okay, let's talk contractors. For any solicitation, let me back up. In theory, contractors should be set up to review the specifications as defined, purchase the specified materials, and submit EPDs to the delegate, and then install the materials on the project. In reality, that may not happen, so OSA will have waivers in place for the instances where it is necessary. For any solicitation beginning on or after January 1st, 2024, contractors shall, 1, obtain EPDs for all eligible materials procured for a public project. They shall submit EPDs to the agency or institution delegate prior to installation on the site, meaning contractors should procure the eligible materials and obtain their EPDs and then submit the EPDs to the agency or institution before installing them on site. Here's something new. Contractors shall report information related to the transportation of eligible materials for products sourced over 100 miles from the project site. I'm sure that has caught your attention a little bit, so let's talk about it. So in this meeting today, we did not define OSA's responsibilities, but through this legislation, OSA was given authority to include transportation related emissions as part of the GWP. However, we do not want to set limits on the transportation emissions, as we do not want to limit competition. Instead, OSA will simply be requiring the reporting of data related to the transportation of eligible materials. So, beginning January 1st of 2024, for products sourced over 100 miles from the project site, contractors shall record and report information relating to the transportation of eligible materials. Contractors shall record the weight of the cargo, the mode of transportation, whether that be by truck, rail, barge, etc., and the total distance traveled, and they shall report this information accordingly. So if, as one instance, if the total distance is unknown, zip codes will suffice. This information will be used to estimate the GWP impacts that occur from transporting eligible materials from distributor to site. And so OSA will conduct mathematical conversions via spreadsheet to determine the resulting GWP, as there's actually a pretty simple equation to follow using these parameters that will give you a GWP. And so while we will be collecting this information, it's important to note that this will not be considered as criteria for the materials quite yet. This is just to obtain the information and understand. You can't adjust what you don't measure. So contractors shall report this information to the delegate for each transport of eligible materials. Delegates shall submit this information along with product EPDs to the OSA. And this submission process will also be released fall of 2023 or start of the new fiscal year. Made it through some of those responsibilities. Let's talk processes. So when evaluating a consultant for qualifications, try to ensure that individuals understand how to specify components that meet the GWP thresholds. So they can read what the GWP impact is on a certain material, and they can understand what they want to design with. Additionally, ensure that individuals can understand, locate, and specify compliant EPDs. There are a number of EPD databases out there. A top one is EC3, and so it's pretty simple to use. Make sure that consultants or contractors can obtain this information. Additionally, ensure that individuals have knowledge and experience with LEED for buildings and the requirements and guidelines behind those buildings. Because as mentioned at the beginning of this, you can kind of kill two birds with one stone by complying with the Clean Colorado Act, as well as obtaining certifications. Okay, bid evaluation. So to evaluate a bid for compliance with the Buy Clean Colorado Act, ensure that contractors can identify which materials included in the bid require EPDs. So those are those eligible materials. Also ensure that contractors can follow project specifications and procure all the specified materials. Don't want to be in a situation where your contractor is purchasing materials that you hadn't specified or that were not specified. Additionally, contractors can obtain product EPDs for all specified eligible materials. This is important when we're comparing an industry-wide EPD to a product EPD. Ensure that your contractors are providing product EPDs. Ensure that they can record and report all the required information. That'll be EPDs, the transportation-related emissions, waivers, etc. Okay, so how should you manage your contractor submittals? For each project, OSA recommends establishing a system or simply folders to store each project's information in EPDs. Maintain organization of these EPDs. There will be lots of materials and corresponding EPDs. OSA recommends organizing the EPDs by eligible material category folders nested within the project folder. Kind of have that, yeah. Project folder, material folders. That would be beneficial. Additionally, we recommend downloading and utilizing the OSA developed forms and instructions. These include the compliance checks, waiver documents, specification sheets, and more that will be released at the start of the next fiscal year. So just be prepared, make sure you have all documentation in place. Additionally, record the weight, distance, and mode of transportation for transporting eligible materials for each project. Try to keep this information all on one spreadsheet per project, likely, so it's easily accessible and describes the project in its entirety. And it keeps it all in one place, so you're not searching through multiple spreadsheets. Finally, we recommend submitting EPDs and transportation information to us as received as part of the closeout submittal documentation. I guess it's not a recommendation, this is a requirement. Submit it as listed on the pre-acceptance checklist, SBP 05. In summary, it will make your life much easier if you work on keeping this information organized from the start so that it's ready and available when it's time to submit. Okay, I am blowing through this, so my apologies. Talking fast. Well, we've given you lots of information, and now we want to hear from you. Our goal with this meeting is to identify the gaps in training that we currently have, but our overall goal is to support compliance and gain an understanding of what you all need to know to comply with the Buy Clean Colorado Act. Our issue is that we don't develop projects as you do, so we are unaware of some of the nuances that you go through with specifying materials, working with consultants and contractors, and each department's procurement process at that. So to solve this issue, we want to determine the gaps in our training. We want to develop a training syllabus so that we train delegates and corresponding folks on the information that they need to know rather than what we think they need to know. So we want to assist with the questions that you have and provide an understanding so it's easier for you and everyone else to comply. Accordingly, we've developed some questions to help direct some of the information that we want to know. As one example, what isn't clear about House Bill 21-1303 requirements? But all of this information we have put into a survey, which I'll be sending out by the end of the day today, and we'd love your feedback. Yes. So as mentioned, the questions on the previous slide are all contained within the survey that we'll be sending out. Please fill out this survey by January 6th of 2023, as that's when we'll be finalizing our training syllabus. And as a reminder, OSA will be holding additional trainings based on the outcomes of this meeting, and those trainings will likely be held in February or March of this next year. Sweet. Yes, as mentioned, I flew through this, but we have plenty of time for questions. Thank you all for your patience and persistence. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. Otherwise, we'll go through the chat.
I have a question, Bailey.
Mark?
So I know that we use a lot of concrete and steel. That's our primary building materials. And I know those materials have a high embodied energy. Are we going to be changing the materials that we use to build with?
Well, you may have to if those materials, one, don't have an associated EPD, as EPDs are required to comply with this legislation. So that's one. If they don't have an EPD, you'll have to find a new material. Two, if that product does have an EPD, but has a higher GWP impact than our limits. In that case, then you'd need to look for another material that does comply with OSA's limits and has a corresponding EPD.
I'm just trying to get a general sense of what we're up against. Are we going to stop building with concrete? Are we going to stop building with steel? I'm just trying to get a sense of what this means.
No, there is no indication that we should stop using the types of materials that we are currently using. However, they just need to be manufactured in a way where they have a reduced impact on the environment, because EPDs are developed based on the manufacturing processes of a product, and therefore it really is tackling that manufacturing aspect. Those folks need to develop products that have compliant impacts. So we don't want to be building with materials that have this high embodied carbon impact. We'd rather use something with less. And so that's really puts it back on the manufacturers. Although, as you know, procurement folks, we do have to deal with the waiting game and just waiting on them to fix their processes. I'm sorry, does that help?
Well, also, Mark, I want to add, some industries, particularly the concrete and asphalt industry, more concrete, because of other regulations they have, they've really looked at improving the, reducing the energy load, the energy mixture on their concrete. And concrete is probably, of all the manufacturers, farther along on what might be called green concrete because of mercury reduction requirements and other reduction requirements. And so it's not, we're telling everyone to go to structural wood right now or structural steel. It's just a recognition of carbon in the manufacturing of our facilities is a large issue. We've dealt with transportation, we've electrified or decarbonized the grid. When it comes to buildings, the next big issue is the carbon in the manufacturing of a facility. And that's what we're looking at right now. We're not telling you to change how you do stuff, but just do a better choice on materials. And I want to jump to the next question in chat is requirements for every CC, CR, or CM project. The requirements for every public works project as defined as $500,000 or more, source of funds is not the question anymore. It's public works.
So 500K, anything under 500K doesn't have to deal with this.
Correct.
What if you have a project, like I've got a control maintenance project that's $1 million, it's replacing exhaust fans. There's going to be some structural steel holding up the exhaust fans. It looks like the intent of this is clearly on new construction or major project. Am I going to have to comply for the steel, because it is structural, that holds up a fan or a piece of structural framing that's on a minor project?
You're into the details, and right now the answer is probably yes, because it does not distinguish between type of contract. It just says public works.
I thought it said something about not maintenance projects in the early slide.
It does. And
Let me go back.
Is control maintenance maintenance?
that's where I was going.
That's all.
I don't have that answer. It's stalling.
So Rod, let's get back to them on this
Yeah.
because I think it does comply. I don't think there was a call out that exempted controlled maintenance. I think you're going to have to use the materials. The intent of the legislator was to impact all projects, because it very specifically talks about public projects, and controlled maintenance projects are public projects. But we'll get back to you and we'll have an update on the website.
Another question. Yeah, another question on transportation and on the weight. Statute does allow us the option of looking at GWP for transportation. And yes, I mean, how do you determine the weight of the equipment you're being supplied? And do you go from distribution center or the manufactured site? we will get back to you on that information. We're not sure exactly how we're going to, what kind of information we want from transportation, how we're going to record it. And there's more questions here.
If a contractor is purchasing materials from a distribution facility, do they need to document shipping methods, distance, etc. from the distribution? Okay, that's kind of similar question.
Yep.
Mhm.
The next one, I don't have an answer. The approved materials will be developed by OSA. I want to say no. We are setting the limits of the categories.
Mhm.
We have identified sometimes that some categories don't directly link to construction components. And so we're working on that aspect. But as to us, OSA determine a list of approved materials, no, we're not going down that path.
You'll be setting limits for categories of eligible materials. Hopefully I can help with this. So as one example, structural steel, we have 3 subcategories for that. Hollow structural sections, steel plate, and I forget, my brain's slipping, but essentially, so we'll be setting GWP limits for that hollow structural section, plate steel, all within the structural steel subcategory.
Outreach to AGC and AIA.
We've actually already had trade presentation earlier this year, so we've already spoke with some of those folks and obtained their feedback. So there has been outreach conducted, and there will likely be further outreach. When and where will we find the GWP limits for each material product category? These will be released in 2023, and so you can expect to find them most likely before the start of the next fiscal year, but that date is TBD. It'll definitely be in the next coming months when we will post those, and they will be posted to the OSA website. Oh, how are you going to decide max GWP at OSA? Well, our initial GWP limits, we are determining based off the industry-wide environmental product declarations that we find, as they represent regional, a regional impact from various manufacturers. So that is a better way in which we can set the initial limits now, and then they will be reduced over the years. But folks should be able to meet these industry-wide limits, given that they are produced across the nation. So this is what the average that we are facing. And so that's what OSA will be setting it at, is that average for the product. And so that really encourages manufacturers to reduce that incrementally. But everyone should be able to comply given the materials that are out there. Unless that is one example, if a product has a high impact, they will likely not meet OSA's initial limits.
Have we identified appropriate justification for a waiver on submitted EPDs? There are really 2 different waivers. There is a design waiver and a waiver by the contractor. Have we completely figured out the waiver process? No, we had some ideas about a design waiver, because that we realized we're going to be working with next fiscal year is a design waiver process. We're looking at availability materials, cost figures and stuff like that. But no, we don't have a complete, as we stated, we're going to have that form available next fall. And so we're going to look at the different options, criteria for a design waiver. Then after that, we'll start looking at the contractor's waiver, because we still have a little bit of time on a contractor's waiver, but we do need to get the design waiver out next fall.
To add to that, okay, go ahead.
Yes, go ahead, Bailey.
Just to add to that, the statute does define some justifications, including for a waiver, specifically like if there are no EPDs available, or if you can't obtain the material, as one example. So we are working to make those applicable to situations that could occur around Colorado. So that's why it's still a work in progress. We are still trying to make the statute language work for our waiver process, or our waiver process work for the statute, hand in hand.
The solicitation, it is for the first solicitation. So if you are already in a project right now, it doesn't apply. This is for new projects that receive new money with solicitations after January 1st, 2024.
Okay, what kind of turnaround can we expect for compliance review of EPDs? So we're actually working to develop a form. So it's just a survey that you'll fill out. It's kind of like a quiz, and then you'll input information from the EPD, and it'll give you an answer at the end, whether it is compliant or not. So quick turnaround, you should be able to fill it out on your own and get an answer just for that quick verification. Okay.
Is there a clause? Yeah, I mean, again, this next question is all about the waiver process. No, there is not a specific clause. I don't know, I mean, I've not looked at that waiver. Have you, Bailey? I know you have probably since then.
Yeah, they're from the statute. Okay, we have if a product meeting the maximum acceptable global warming potential for a category of eligible materials is not reasonably priced or is not available to the contractor on a reasonable basis, the agency of government may waive the requirements of this section for that project. So there is no specific relative cost. It is, as stated, unreasonably priced or unavailable on a reasonable basis. So it is up to OSA to define that or make it work, essentially. Should the increase for the material cost be a separate line item, like what is done for prevailing wages in apprenticeship to maintain transparency? Initial thoughts say no, it shouldn't, it will be built into it. It's just good to recognize if there is an additional cost imposed and make sure to budget for that. It doesn't necessarily have to be a separate line item to add.
Now, if you're going through a waiver process, definitely want to review that cost. But no, I don't think we're going to change our capital construction cost form, control maintenance cost form to include another line or row for the BCCCO requirements, price cost requirements.
As a follow-up on the GWP limits, will they be set based on national industry or regional industry? We've looked at national industry-wide EPDs for some products, and the goal is to eventually, this is one way we can reduce the GWP impacts over time, is as we get more regional-based averages, we can start to go towards those. However, there's only so much manufacturing in Colorado compared to other states, so we don't have as good of a regional average currently. In the future, though, that is likely to change. I will mention that there are a number of buy clean policies being implemented across the nation, so it'll be picking up momentum and folks will be feel inclined to participate. Does this apply to state-funded projects only?
Read the public works definition again.
Oh, I have to. Go to that one right quick.
So the answer is public works as defined by statute. Public work is not defined by source of funds.
Thank you, Rod. Ooh, okay. Does the 100-mile radius have to stay within Colorado borders? No. That'll be from wherever your materials are being delivered from to the project. So that could be outside of Colorado for that matter. It could be within Colorado too. You aren't, as one example, going to find an asphalt producer that's 3 counties over, if possible. But so you'll want to choose the closest one. So in theory, you could be choosing a really close manufacturer producer, or if you needed steel delivered from out east, then it would be a much greater distance, and you still need to report on that transportation emissions.
And Bailey, do you explain why we went to 100 miles?
Oh, that corresponds and aligns with the requirements imposed by LEED. So we are trying to stick with national standards where we can. Sweet. Are there any more questions? Cool. Well, as far as our next steps go, by the end of the day, you can expect an email from us. It'll contain the slides from this meeting, as well as a link to our Buy Clean Colorado Act webpage, where this video will be posted. So you'll have resources from today's meeting. And if we would love to have your feedback. So please fill out that survey by January 6th, and then we'll proceed with determining training materials and scheduling dates for next year's training sessions.